Good evening, everyone. It's going to be kind of a night where we're going to try and finish a bunch of stuff up. Too much stuff sitting around. We'll be doing a fair amount of sanding, which is where we're going to start out tonight. I start these natural reds. I go around the rim without the lathes running. It's generally going to be where there's going to be the most amount of area that's going to need some little extra attention. And if the piece is so way out of whack or whatever, you sand the whole thing just like that. Which when I do some of the wet wood stuff, that's how I would sand them. See how much some of this stuff has a tendency to move. Be careful with this one because this is fairly deep. So we could whack our fingers. But we can go the whole way out to the edge. Just have to be light on the pressure. We'll stop and make sure we got rid of all the tool marks, which we didn't. There's some compression lines. The easiest way to go back after them is by hand. Just rotate it by hand. I'm gonna hit this bottom a little bit more. Kind of left a little ridge in there, so I'll make that shrink down a little bit. There's definitely some ripples going up through, but first grit's the most important. We're gonna get rid of anything that needs to be gotten rid of. And then from there, we just cruise through them, but I think that looks pretty good. Why do I have a big black Get rid of all of our dust as we go. Certainly not the most exciting part of wood turning is to sand all this stuff, but kind of has to be done. So I might get tired of doing this after one piece and go back to, I have some other stuff. I always have more stuff to turn, so. And one of my wood guys brought me some wood from Montana, from Aspen. I did turn one piece of it so far. Turns nice, but it has a very unique smell. But it does have some very nice color. Not very big, but has some nice color to it. That was 220. We'll go the whole way up to 600 with this. That piece of 400 is about shot. Sandpaper don't last forever. So that's the inside ready to go. We'll wipe off the dirt while we're here. Paper towel does a wonderful job wiping that off. If I don't get as much of the dirt off as I possibly can, I go putting my finish on there, then the dirt stays in the finish. Causes me more work. We don't want more work. We want less work. You can see it's pretty colored. Just a simple, cheap, basically a tack cloth, sort of. So now we'll flip it around. We'll finish up the outside. And we'll go back over to overhead. This is basically a friction drive. I'm gonna put some paper towel in there because if it slips at all as I'm doing my work, then it'll leave a mark in there. I've already shrank the original tenon down too, because I'm going to make this into a bead for a foot. And we'll do that before we sand. And that we'll do with our spindle gouge. We won't go crazy on the speed, because we don't need a ton of speed for this kind of work. Just sort of like caress the corner and drop the handle. Come up over the top. Can even go in the other direction. Just scrape a little bit out of there. Make sure we don't have anything drastic there, which we don't. Well, I left a ridge. Could be a bit of an issue there. This caused me more sanding. I guess I really didn't need to raise this. Oh, well, that's all right. I just use a scraper. It's going to allow me to go in there and get rid of that little ridge. And now we're ready to sand. As you can see, this is the one from last week that we did all the super glue work to, fill in the cracks. So it's had pretty much a week to dry. Get that started for the undercut. All this down here will go away eventually. We'll get our dust collector where we want it to be. This time we'll be out on the outside. We'll definitely will go to the 3-inch pad. This makes it a little quicker. First order of business is to get rid of the super glue. We'll do that by hand, or without the machine running, put it that way. It's easier. I found that it's easier to do it this way. Get rid of that before we even start in on with it spinning. You did a very good job getting that disc on there straight. Actually, I guess the first thing I should do would be to take care of our bead and that down there. So might as well just get all fresh sandpaper. Start today. So run it over something around to break the glue up a little bit on the sandpaper. And we'll go forward to start with. I slow the speed down more than what I had it. Maybe not quite that much. Because when you're sanding with hand sandpaper, it'll have a tendency to get hot quicker. And heat is not our friend. This is 100-180 paper. I don't think I need anything higher, coarser than that to get in there. And I'll sand into that groove and just a little ways up because the pads will get down in there pretty far. Just like all the other sanding that I do, the first grit, which is normally the coarsest grit, is going to be the one that I sand the longest with. Because we're making sure we have a white line in there, so that's a little bit of disturbed grain. I do need to get that taken care of. And I want to use the edge where the sandpaper is folded out or is not folded. Gives me a sharper edge in that corner. Got the majority of it. Piece of sandpaper it'll just keep shrinking because I just keep cutting off the part that I just used. So I have fresh, sharp sandpaper. Just like the tools. If it's not sharp, it doesn't cut very well. So now we can just breeze right up through the rest of the grits. just like the others, we'll just wipe it off each time, each grip. When we're using sheet sandpaper, we definitely want to keep this moving quite quickly. Otherwise, it's going to leave concentric rings all the way around. And we don't really want those. That is what will show up the sanding scratches. Dang, looks like I should have looked a little harder before I switched. Shit. I missed that. There's actually some stuff that's torn up right here. Might even take more than 180 grit paper to get rid of them. The cherry is pretty soft. Let's see. Well, welcome, Raiders, from Redwish Expedition. How are you all doing this evening? We're doing a whole lot of sanding right now. I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, well, yeah. If you can speak English, I'll understand. French, I will not. Thank you. This is the one. This one I did last week on stream here. It had some issues. Doesn't really show up. That's a crack that was filled. More cracks there that were filled. They're filled with actually they're filled with super glue that I colored with mica powder. Now it'll pop once I put some finish on it here in a little bit. But I missed a spot in here. Now I'll be using a different CA than what you're used to seeing. I use a CA that actually has a 40-second time delay and no odor, and it'll only require one coat to do this, and then buff it from there. Pretty neat stuff, but it's only available here in the States. Sorry. I got to do this foot complete as far as sanding goes before, and the rest of it I'll power sand. And I use the paintbrush to get rid of the dust and debris off of it, and any excess grit that might be left behind from the previous coarser grit. So that should be that. And now we can use our drill to power sand. That we will do in reverse, because the reason I sand in reverse is for the dust collection. It does a much better job for me. Would do a much better job if the hose would actually like to stand up like it's supposed to. I've already sanded off the super glue part, the part that was filled, so the rest, it's just now it's a matter of sanding the whole thing. With a 3-inch disc, I can go the whole way up to the top. Just have to have a little bit light pressure when I get out to where the natural edge part is. I'm seeing a little bit harder where I put this super glue at. Kind of showing up as a little bit of dark spot right there because the super glue was copper in color. So I don't necessarily want it to show through. We'll just progressively go right through the grits. Let's say I started with 120, we'll go to 150. $180. $220. 320. $400. Lastly, will be 600. That's pretty much done and ready for finish. I'm going to turn my dust collector off so I don't have to listen to the noise. The last thing I'm going to do with it is a little bit of sheet paper, 800 grit. I'm going to do little random orbit circles, just in case there's any scratches that would show up. This will break up them scratches. Looks like we could have actually done a little better job sanding there. There's some, it's not really a torn grain. Some of the stuff on the end grain on this, on these, just doesn't always cut as clean as it should. It's pretty much impossible to sand out too. But the super glue will actually fill some of that in and it'll become smooth to the touch. So nice simple tack cloth, paper towel. It'll clean off a whole bunch of good amount of the dust and dirt. It's pretty much ready for finish. Like I say, this is a night full of a lot of this. We'll get our trusty glove on. We might have to actually turn some stuff. I don't know. I've been turning Christmas little trees half the day or 3/4 of the day as it is. So I don't necessarily want to sit here and sand all night either. It's not very interesting to watch, for one. So I put a little piece of polyester felt in there. Acts as a little reservoir for the glue. The glue is the, yeah, can't read the label anymore because I actually use it out of an 8-ounce bottle and I just keep filling up my 2-ounce bottle out of it. What this is a slow setting, no odor super glue. Yet no reactions to on the paper towels. And we have 40 seconds to get this done. So we'll load up our pad. We'll start on the end grain. That's going to soak up the most amount of material.
Not worried about that little groove with the bead just yet. Go to the other end grain. What I'm looking for is basically saturation. I want to fill up the pores, and then I'll wipe off the excess from there. The idea of this stuff is use plenty of it so that you get good saturation, fill things up, like them little worm tracks right there. Some of that worm poop still left in there, so that just filled them in, made them, they will become nice and hard and be part of the bowl instead of something that could fall out at some point. Cherry's fairly thirsty, so it's going to take a fair amount here on the end grain. This is not overly thin. It's about 3/8 of an inch thick, so it's not. I really should have a piece of wax paper on the inside. That's the cheater's way of doing the groove. Just put a drop of it right in the groove. It follows, gravity takes over and it follows it the whole way around the piece. So it looks like we're getting pretty close to being saturated. One last little rub down around it, and then we'll wipe off the excess, and that will be done. It don't get much easier than that, at least in my opinion. So we'll take a dry paper towel, and we're going to wipe off the excess. This and I will definitely have some places that I'll have to go back and sand a little bit or use a little bit of a scraper on them, because I've already put super glue in all these areas right here. It sort of bubbles up. It doesn't know what to do. This particular one is not one to put a second coat on, because if it can't soak in, it doesn't know what to do. It just sits on the surface and beads up like a well-waxed car. So those areas that have already been sealed there, it's sitting on the surface. It didn't soak in. But it also makes it cure quicker or set up quicker. So that's it. It does have a 24-hour cure time, which doesn't mean it takes 24 hours to dry. It takes 24 hours from now, it will be as hard as it's ever going to get, which is when I buff them. I try not to buff anything until I give it the full 24 hours. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of activator just so I can keep moving. Give it one nice spritz, 2 spritz, and I'm spraying up here so the mist lands down on it. I don't know why that jam chuck likes to do that. Squeaky, squeaky, squeaky. So in actuality, it's dry to the touch right now. I don't have any problem touching it with my bare fingers. You could find a place maybe on there that's would have a little bit of, maybe a little bit of stickiness to it, I guess you'd say. So now we'll put it back in put it in the chuck, and we'll do the inside. Move some things out of the road. Two more paper towels. Another piece of felt. And switch back to the end view. And we'll do the same thing as what I just did for the other side. Rolling up a piece of felt into my paper towel. Gives us a nice little pad. The inside will take less material because the outside has already been sealed. Hence the natural action of it trying to soak through to the other side has been stopped. So this side, like I say, whichever side you do second will take less material. It doesn't take that terribly much material to start with. 2-ounce bottle, this goes a long ways as far as finishing goes. As you can see, I spent a whole lot less time on the inside than when I did the outside. I don't want to go up over the rim at this point yet. I got to think about what I want to do with the rim. It is the natural edge. It's got little worm holes or little worm tracks and everything else on that. I usually will put a dye on there, either black or a brown or something along those lines. But I'll let this super glue set up at least for probably like an hour or so. I can come back to that before I quit today and color that. And then I'll put a little bit of the 3408 on there as well. When I put it on the rim though, I won't buff the rim. I'll let that just be a satin finish. Just sort of protecting it, especially if I dye it, because the dye will come off on your fingers if somebody would touch it. The moisture in your fingers will reactivate the dye. And then you'd have little brown or black fingers. Once again, we'll hit it with the activator, which is about all. The bottle of activator lasts me a long time too. As you can see, I have 1 or 2 sprays and that's it. So that's basically one project almost complete. Once it cures, or if I was going to work for several hours more, I could come back in a couple hours from now, put this back on there, and take this tenon off of it. But I like to use a vacuum chuck, so this will wait till tomorrow, because you definitely don't want to pull a vacuum on any of this, because you'll find out that how much of the super glue is still active on the inside, so to speak, and then you would have a bit of a problem. What was I gonna do? Oh, I gotta do a little bit more sanding. I have another one of these kind of science project type of bowls. Another piece of cherry that has lots of cracks in it, and also has some bug cavity in it. So we're probably going to have to do something with the bug cavity. But I'll mount it the same way I just did this other one. This one's considerably bigger. It's also will be a calabash. It'll be a totally round bowl. The bottom will be round. This tenon will just disappear, and this will become round down here. So it's kind of like a, I don't know, a weeble wobble kind of a thing. They're kind of neat. They're also a little bit harder to do, but because I'm sure I don't have all the cracks totally filled in yet. That's why I want to sand some of it. You can see this crack actually went the whole way through, so I was doing inside and out. Go back to overhead so it makes more sense. So I'm going to turn my dust collector back on. We'll sand some of that off and see what it does. That's what I was afraid of. I just did some of this earlier this afternoon, and that feels like it's still gooey underneath. Maybe not. Guess it was just the bubble that was gooey. So we'll give it a little whirl and see what it does. Just like the other piece, I will sand each one of these off. Super glue sands pretty easily. It just likes to clog up the sandpaper because it is plastic. Better than what I thought it might be. As you can see, this thing had a lot of issues. It's sort of done with a crotch piece, where there was more than one place where there was limbs coming out, which is always a place for it to crack. You can see there's a limb, another limb, another limb. That one actually feels tacky. So that's all the cracks on the outside. I guess we'll see if we can get it to sand. And that one felt like it was gooey. Give it a little bit of speed. I'm not going to turn it very fast because it's not totally, even though I actually trued it up when I sanded or when I recut it, then all the screwing around that I've done, it's had enough time to start moving again. And so I figured we're going to have a, you have to sand a little bit more. We've got some places it's
not being very cooperative. At this stage, what I'm looking to do is get rid of any and all the full marks of any kind there would be. Any place there might be a little disturbed grain, like right there for some reason. It's sort of end grain there. Now it says that I can't go and sort of spot sand little areas. Just got to keep the drill moving around so that we don't dig a trench. The 120 grit sandpaper will definitely create a trench. That thing is loose. That's probably another place actually to try and fill. Which will definitely mean if I gotta fill this, then we're not gonna lose. Yeah, like I say, they're gonna fall right out. So nothing a little trusty dental pick won't take out.
This crack is pretty deep, as you can see right there. And there's probably, yeah, I did fill the inside. I was going to say that. I can see another little crack in there, so it goes the whole way through. So there's our lovely cavity. So I'll turn the dust collector off for that. And now that's sort of too big to fill with super glue. So we'll have to put something else in there. Maybe we'll put a little turquoise in there or something. A little man-made turquoise. But I got to fill this. Got to try and cover this area up out here. Use a little painter's tape to try and keep it from running down over the edge. Like such. This one will switch to the 3460 super glue, which is the one that's would allow me to put multiple coats of something on. It also has a little bit longer open time. It's more like 50 seconds to work. Like I say, this is a man-made turquoise. So I just get some down in there. This is a, I forget what they call it, a mixture. This has the coarse or semi-coarse as well as the fine in it. But for whatever goofy reason with this stuff, the coarse seems to like to come up to the top of the surface and sit there in the container. I don't necessarily want to fill this the whole way full at this point. Just want to get it partially filled, and then we'll soak it down with some glue. And then we'll put more on top of that and more glue. That's got it partially filled. And then we'll use the 3460. Same characteristics as the other one. This is actually just thicker. Even though it really doesn't appear that it's any thicker, but it is. So that should soak down through it. Go the whole way down to the wood and adhere to the wood on the bottom as well. And now we can work on filling the rest of it up. And not pull the stuff out that's already in there. I try and create like a ridge on top here, and then I'll just drop some super glue on it so that it runs down through it. And this will be the same process there in a day or so. Will be to sand it back off rather than cutting it back off. Once again, a little messy. One thing since it's a slow setting CA glue, when you get it on your fingers like I just did there, gives you time to wipe it off before it dries. Unless you got really wet fingers. This will give it a little help, give it a little activator. I say my can is about all. Just shoot up on there to make sure. And once again, that'll be another project to sit off to the side and come back to another day. Because it will take hours for that to actually totally set up the whole way down through. I mean, it's hard on the surface right now, but I guarantee if I tried to sand that right now, it wouldn't cooperate very well. I shouldn't have done that. Like I say, it's kind of my science project, kind of a bowl. I also have a copper and brass powder, which looks kind of neat, and some things like that too. Could have used that. What I really need to do is take some tenants off of some things. Once again, that's kind of boring to watch. Let me show you some stuff that's ready to be buffed. There's a little cherry plate bowl. It has been filled. Cracks have been filled. Same process, super glue and the colored super glue. These are two little itty bitty bowls, little finger bowls. They also need the vacuum chuck and taking that little bit off of them. Like I say, it's not overly exciting stuff to watch. I try not to see how much sanding I can do on stream, because it is not very interesting. So my shop already smells like this aspen, so I might as well. I have 3 more of them to do. So rather than boring everybody to death with sanding, we'll do a couple of them. So I show you my process, right or wrong. It works for me. It may not work for everybody, but it works quite well for me. So what I'm going to do, this is a half a log. Actually, I could get the other half. It would maybe make more sense. Like I say, these are not very big. They didn't start out their life very big. So we had a log. This is the center, the pith of it. Chainsaw straight down through it. This chainsaw cut for length as well. This stuff does have an aroma to it. So what I'm going to do is find a geographical center thereabouts. I'm going to get a stiffer pencil than that. So it's 6 inches long, so half of that's 3. Not rocket science. And here we're just going to, if we close one eye, we can get close enough anyhow, to the center side to side. I guess while I'm doing them, I might as well do them both. Obviously that didn't get cut quite as well because it's half an inch longer. Doesn't really matter. This log was not overly round either. So I'll take a paddle bit because I need to drill a hole. Need to get through the bark layer and the cambium layer. Gotta get down into solid wood. I think my drill bit could use a little, sort of a pain because it doesn't like the cut. Just kind of like tears it off. I think that's far enough. We're through the bark, so that'll work on that one. See, that one went breathing through it. Not sure why this one didn't. That'll be good enough. These are wet, green. I don't know how much before the old guy came home. He goes to Montana for a month over the summer. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go over here to my workbench, but I'm going to drive this drive center in with my attitude adjuster, I guess you'd call it. Show you what it looks like. It's a wooden mallet. As you can see, it's pretty chewed up. I really need to find centers on it and put it back between centers because some of this stuff is starting to chip. This is a piece of black locust, which is very hard. This one also has a little rod on the end, but as you can see, I drove it in hard enough that I can pick it up by the drive center, which is what we wanted it to do. So bring up our tailstock. No point in the tailstock because I want to be able to manipulate this. You'll see here in a couple minutes what I'm talking about as far as the manipulation part of it. I'm going to bring my tool rest up. We're going to find the corner that's sticking out the furthest. Which looks like that's the one right there. Now to use my thumb, I'm going to line up with the top edge of this, thereabouts. At this point, I'm not totally worried about it being super accurate, but it looks like I'm off quite a bit. So I'm going to move it a little bit. This is where not having a point in there is kind of crucial. Close that shower curtain. Lathe needs to go in forward. Get my big bowl gouge, make shorter work of this. So we know our points are not going to make contact with our tool rest. It'll be very close at one point, but that's okay. So we go back to our face shield, turn it on to very slow speed. We're going to bring up our speed until we pick up a vibration, which in these is usually not very high, not very fast, because it's not nowhere near round. So we'll make a couple cuts across here, because we want this to be round. And I'm cutting from the top down so that we don't tear the bark off just yet. This gives me better success of not removing the bark.
I gotta go nice and slow because it's turning very slowly. I don't want the tool to be bouncing. So we're getting closer. We got about that much, that much. That means that side is further in. Now let's make a couple more cuts and we'll see where we're at. We got another little ways to go to get it to be round on the ends. And then we can go back and check. Got it semi-balanced up. We got another 150 RPMs or so out of it. This makes the cutting a little bit more efficient. It is wet. I can feel the water spray on my arm. A little rod in there, a little bit of pith left in there. Hopefully that rod doesn't go very deep. Doesn't look like it comes out the other end, so we're just about round. So we're cutting more there than what we are there. So now we're going to make an adjustment for that. Because I want them to be I want it to be as balanced as I can possibly get it. So check the top here while we're at it. Top's pretty close. Like I say, that's is why this right here is why I do it the way I do it. Because if you were to use some other method, you chuck this up to get it started, and you may not have the availability of correcting any of that. I see a lot of people do it differently. I see a lot of people do it a whole lot different than I do. I see people drill a big, like 3-inch Forstner bit hole or something like that to be able to mount it, a faceplate or something else in that direction, in that fashion. So now we've moved it. Looks like we could actually move it a little bit more. And I'm gonna move it a little bit more, and we're gonna call that good. But I'm not gonna bother making another cut down across here. I'm just gonna come around to the back side, and we'll start shaping it, and that'll take care of it. So now we need to get this bottom flattened out. And once again, we can inspect because we knew we had a bit of a rotten spot right there. Some sort of wormhole or critter hole went in there. So we can go to that fashion. And then we should be able to come in a little bit that way. Just the other one too. Now you'll be able to see more of what we're doing. 2 views. Now we're going to get rid of this corner. Figure out what's going on with this here as to whether we have to shrink it down more yet. Angle the tool rest a little bit. I could probably just easily go to the shorter tool rest would be better, but I'm just kind of being lazy a little bit. So now I should be able to run it at pretty much whatever speed I feel comfortable with. And then we'll get rid of this corner. I'm going to stop and take a look and see what we got. It almost looks like a little vermin hole or something there. So now we can mark our tenant. We use the jaws that we have on there. Scribing with the left leg. Don't let the right leg touch. We got things roughed out. We're going to go back to a smaller gouge. You can even use the short one. And I'm going to switch tool rests. Switch back to a shorter. Just allows me to get it in closer to where I need to be without working way off of the end of the tool rest. I think that'll work. I'm going to leave this about 3/4 of an inch thick. We'll let it dry, whether we microwave it or whether we let it air dry. That'll be another scenario. We're going to make another cut now that we have our shape, pretty much what we want. So I'll use a bevel supported cut the whole way. Other than some little ripples in it, it's nice and cleanly cut, no torn grain, which is what I'm after. It's a little, we'll see what happens with that. So we'll get our tenant proper. Using a spindle gouge for that. Go into that corner and make sure it's nice and clean. The way it'll run true. Left more than enough of a shoulder on there. Don't really need that amount of shoulder either. I'm going to go in here and clean up some of this. And that's the outside of that one done. So for the moment, we're done with the tailstock. Get rid of our drive center. With a little snap at the end, locks it in place. We're going to line up our grain with the jaws of the chuck, meaning this is the end grain. It's coming up and down, so I'm going to go put that in between the jaws. Gives me the best grip that I can possibly get. Now, we're going to need the longer tool rest or not. Maybe. Probably. This makes it a little bit more convenient. Especially if there's more hanging out here, so that when I reach over here to turn the lathe off or something like that, I don't reach through and hit the end. It's more of a safety issue than it is a kind of practical issue. So we changed something, we're going to slow it down. We're going to bring our speed back up. Whole time standing off to the side, just in case. Never know. Stranger things have happened. When I get out closer to the end, the edge, I'm standing with my right hip against the lathe. I'm looking straight down over the piece. Left eye, left side, right eye, right side. I don't necessarily need to see what the tool's doing because I can look over here on the right side to see where how it's cutting and what it's cutting. So now we need our calipers. When we do them wet, we have to be pretty particular on the wall thickness. Not necessarily the true number. I set it for 3/4 of an inch. It's more the fact that so that we're consistent the whole way down through. It gives it the best chance for it to dry without cracking. And it has worked for me for quite some time, so I stick with it. At this point, I mean, I'm fairly tall, so as I'm looking down, I can see the gap that I have created in there. I think we'll leave it. So I'm actually getting thinner down in there, so I'm not going quite as straight as what I thought I was. So we'll correct that. I'll find my bevel first, come back out, let the cut happen out here, and pretty much feather that down to just about nothing. And then we'll check it again. And that should be closer to our 3/4 of an inch. And now we're nice and even on the wings. So the rest of it is solid material, much easier to deal with. So we're getting rid of more of the center. I have my tool rest just a tad high. I don't want the tool heading downhill. That's a recipe for disaster. So we know we got to go a little bit deeper. As you can see, I'm not picking a tool up and repositioning. All I'm doing is coming up, sliding back uphill on the bevel. That way when it drops back over that little ridge that I left, a little step in there, then it's ready to cut and ready to rock and roll. So all we have to do is round out the bottom. The left did leave a little ridge right there. We can clean that up a little bit, but all we have to do is get rid of the center point. Switch gouges one more time. That was the gouge I was using was the 40-degree gouge. It does not like, you can see in here how fuzzed up that is. It doesn't like end grain. So if you want to use the 40-degree gouge, you almost have to use something different for the very bottom of the bowl. This might be a little bit. Could actually go to the bigger one of these two. It's probably 3 inches hanging over the tool rest, but this stuff is soft, so. So now we'll let's get rid of the chips first. It's one of the things with the natural wedge. Chips like to stay inside. So we can see we're plenty deep in there. But at the bottom of it, isn't going to hurt me to be a little deeper down there. I don't necessarily want to go any deeper in the center point because the center point's probably almost down into here. That foot will stay on this piece when it's finished. So I'm not worried about that part of it. But we need to clean up some things up here. That's where that tool doesn't like that. It's too much hanging out. It wants to vibrate a little bit. Not to mention this stuff is very, very wet. We could cheat. Not sure what it'll do on wet wood, but we could use a scraper in here. A lot of people like the scrapers. I don't know what it'll do for the wet wood. Not much. Doesn't want to cut it. But it got rid of some of the chunkiness. Also stood the grain up quite nicely. Which, like I say, at this point it's wet. Not necessarily worried about that. I could just go back to the 60-degree gouge and make one nice swooping cut across there. Would be a better idea. So that cleaned that up. At least it should have. Not totally, but close enough. Like I say, some places when it's wet, when the wood is really wet like this, some of it won't necessarily cut cleanly. But we need it to be the best we can. I'm feeling for the shape. It feels like we have a pretty nice flowing curve. Once this dries, this curve will come back down in more so into the foot, as well as the inside will match the outside. So for a wet turn, green turn bowl, that's good enough. So that's one down, two more to go. Go back to my drive center and live center. Once again, we smack it in nice and hard with the attitude adjuster. Just waxed that today. Obviously, I need to take the banjo off and get it cleaned. Like I say, I do a fairly good amount of work with wet wood. You're gonna have to take a minute or two out probably here very directly and sharpen some tools. Just bring up just a little bit of pressure. Need a little bit more room back here, just so we can do just like what we did with the last one. Get up close and personal with that farthest out point, and then we can eyeball with our thumb. It looks like we're actually pretty good. So we can tighten it up at that point. Go back to our heavier gouge, see if it's got enough edge on it to cut this speed way down. We're going to come up till we get a vibration. Like I say, it's not going to be very fast. Myself, I come in behind my leg on my lathe so that I can get the bevel lined up. I have to go nice and slow because it's only cutting in those four corners. If I try to go too fast, it will bounce. Not what I want. And I could cut that on the bandsaw too, but then I'm left with them tiny little corners that I have to contend with. This way, it's just a pile of chips on the floor. And I have a guy that takes them that I work with, so I like to keep him stocked up. And just because it's moving at a slower pace doesn't mean I still can't take a nice 1/4 to 3/8 inch cut off of it. I just have to move a little bit slower. Go the whole way off the end. We should be close to being round. Yep, getting close. Close enough that we can check it better because we are round at the top. So we're good on that one. I got that much there. That's fairly close there. A bit of a knot coming through there. It's kind of interesting. Good place to create a crack as it dries. Take a little bit lighter cut. And I can sort of taper it to the bottom. Make the cut get fatter as you go down at this point. And slow way down out there because it's not even on the bottom. So we got about that much there. Probably could move that just a little bit. That should be good enough. Hopefully that branch doesn't go the whole way through. Doesn't. Can't imagine that it does. We shall see. I didn't put my tool rest where it needs to be, but we have a big enough bowl gouge to handle it. Yeah, it looks like that branch comes right through there. So we're good on that point. So we'll get rid of our corner next. I'm just going to go back to my smaller bowl gouge. I feel I sort of have a little bit better control with the smaller gouge. As you can see, it doesn't take very long to do these when they're this size and they're wet. That'll pose a problem, I'm sure. Already has a little crack coming out from it. And we need our tenant. I don't know about that. Also sort of looks like it's a little bit too fat this way. I'm not getting the curve that I want.
We'll see if we can correct that and not lose any depth.
We took way more off the bottom, and as we come up here, we just take a very little light little bit off of that.
Take a look at it and see what we got. Still standing some grain up right there. Here's where I'm sort of particular with them. So we started out at about 6 inches. We're still just about 6 inches. So if we go down here, 3 inches is to the bottom of that tenant. And we're going to take more off of that. We got a little branch or something that went through right there. And there's also even a crack starting. So we're going to take that tenant down to nothing and start over with that. Because that spells trouble. It still could spell trouble because of that one. You just never know what you're going to get into on some of these things. That's going to give us a nicer looking shape anyhow. Maybe a challenging one. You can see that. There's a little bit of a knot or limb went through right there. That's going to want to crack. It's kind of not a very good place for a crack to appear. So if I step back and I look at my curve, I do have a hump right there. So what we'll do, we'll finish making our tenant, and then we'll address that. And yes, that is using a spindle gouge on a bowl. Now,
See if we can shrink that down. If that thing has a knot going through it, it's going to fall apart anyhow. So we'll try and carefully cut that off the saw, and then we'll just remark where that point is, which is rather helpful when it comes to remounting them and returning them. So this, we know we drove the live center in there quite hard, so it should stay there. Then we can bring our live center back up, give it a spin, turn it in so that it marks it. Clean the sawdust out of the teeth of the saw because they're wet and it would rust them. Back to the chuck, which we left out. And now we can do the inside. At which point we'll go back to our 40-degree gouge. Should be sharp. I'm going to see if I have to sharpen some tools. Feels like they're starting to get dull. So we turn the speed down, check it very well within reason, because we're not turning something to a eighth of an inch or something like that. Wet wood sort of sticks to everything too. I don't think we're quite there yet as far as thickness, but we're going to stop and check. Now we need another eighth of an inch. Do enough of these, you sort of get good at it. Or you get lucky, whichever. Keep getting the bottom a little deeper than what I necessarily need to. But we have a tenant down here, so for the 3/4 of an inch would actually be measured from more so the bottom of the tenant up into there. So we'll just go back to a 60-degree gouge and we'll make this curve what it's supposed to be. And that's more than good enough for a wet bowl. Okay, so you can do these pretty quick once you get the hang of them. Or did I put it this way? At least I get them done pretty quickly. It's supposed to be nice tomorrow, so I'll probably open the window over in the other room and probably microwave some of these. I've been playing around drying some of this stuff in the microwave. It actually does a pretty good job. I've had pretty good success with it, put it that way. And I don't have to wait for 8 months or something like that for it to dry. I can dry it in a matter of a day. It does take a fair amount of time to do it. I put them in about 30 seconds, 30 to 40 seconds on high each time. And then I pull them out and let them cool for about a half an hour or something like that. And then weigh them. Each time once they've cooled and I'm ready to put them back in, and I weigh them on a kitchen scale, which is going in grams. And once they stop losing weight, they're dry. Or at least once they don't lose more than a gram or two, a couple grams maybe, 5 grams, something like that, then they're certainly dry enough to finish. Then you go back and recut them, get them back into a true form. And then you do a bunch of what I was doing earlier, a bunch of sanding. Of course, the better you get at this, the less time it takes to sand stuff, which is what it's all about, as far as I'm concerned. The least amount of time spent sanding is the best. Move that one a little bit right off the bat. And I think we will just go and sharpen these two 60-degree gouges. And I can take you along for that adventure. As soon as I find my mouse. I use a 2-inch setback. You can use 1.5 inches. Or really whatever you want. Just as long as you do it consistent. And you get a consistent grind every time. That's all there is to it. It's not very difficult. The 5/8 one has a grub screws in it. I pretty much don't have anything that the handle, there's very little stuff that I have that the handle doesn't come out, or the tool doesn't come out of the handle. It takes less room to store everything too, for one. And it makes it easier to sharpen them. Thought there was something hitting me. Always give it a spin, make sure nothing's gonna hit. Not quite there. Not that much. It looks like we're almost pretty even there. Let's see. Another cut. Let's see. Very little. We're going to have to move that. Let's check these top ones. Now that we're down to where we need to be. We're good. So we want to take more off of there, less off of there. That means this has to come this direction. This one's going to be just like the other one. There's a little bit of the pith left in there. There's also, just in a short period of time this afternoon, it's already started to crack going down across there. So we're definitely going to have to come up in somewhere up in there. But we don't need to make another cut coming down across there. We'll just get everything right once we come back up across. Yeah, see that's loose right there. It runs down into there. So we'll just get rid of some of this corner and then we'll shrink it down a little bit in size. Now we're in balance so we can get some speed out of it, which will make it a little faster cutting wise. Getting pretty close to that, where the end of that crack is, I believe. Almost looks like there's a little bit right there that's sort of soft to go with it. So we'll shrink it down a little bit. Stop and take a look. Yeah, it's soft right there. It's going to be a very shallow one. Let's see whether we guessed right. Pretty close. Like I say, it's gonna be a rather shallow one. That's okay. So we'll finish up our tenant. I think we're gonna try something here. See what the traditional scraper will do on wet wood. I've seen people use it. Richard Raffin loves his scrapers. Not that. Oh, shoot. Right, I put it away. I was making little trees earlier, so I had a lot of that work is done with a skew. So that's what I was using this particular handle for. Still left it stood up a little bit, but don't believe there's much of a burr left on that, so it needs sharpened as well. Shape-wise, I think we're close enough. I'm going to let that fuzziness alone. And make sure I have a nice clean place for my chuck to grab. Oh, shoot. Gotta get rid of that big hunky thing. It has a little bit of pith in through there, so that'll definitely crack and want to crack and fall off anyhow as it dries. Like I might, yep, so I thought. Go in the right direction on there, it'll break it right off anyhow. Give it a little indentation so we're good when we turn it around. Stuff does stink though. It's a weird smell. See if my guy at work likes the see whether his pigs like the smell of it. He has chickens and pigs. That's what he uses this stuff for, his bedding. That's a tool rest too high. Don't want the tool headed downhill. And the wood has the advantage. Bad things can happen. Remember, this one is considerably shallower. Not quite. It has some really interesting, like, streaks. Not a real good possibility that bark stays on. It's already loose right there in a couple of places. But we'll see. Starting to go in a little deep. That's all enough to hump right there. Clean that off. Make that go around. Right to the middle. Feels better. Fingers tell all. It's not perfect for sure. Still a little bit of a hump in there, but I don't want to keep playing with it because I'll just keep getting it thinner and thinner down there. We're probably already below our 3/4 of an inch to start with. Yeah. It'll dry out. It'll be close enough. It'll dry okay. Like I said, they're probably gonna hit the microwave tomorrow. It does have some fairly interesting color patterns to it. This darker area will probably turn darker as it dries. So for tonight, they will go in a paper bag. And they'll either stay in the paper bag till they dry, or like I say, I probably will get them out tomorrow just to try it out a little bit and microwave them. Because I have 8 feet of that log, and that's all the way to a foot of it. And I'm going to go back and sand a little bit more on another piece. This is some small little walnut bowls. I gotta figure out what jam chuck I'm going to use. Probably that one, but that one won't fit. It's the wrong jaws. That would work. Actually, I could do the inside. Oh. Maybe not. I don't think they were. No, they were done with the smaller jaws. Although, that will hold it. But I'm not going to cut on it. All I'm going to do is sand. So that'll hold it just fine and dandy. And a fairly good sized pile of chips down here. Nothing compared to doing something 12 or 14 inches in diameter, but even the little ones doesn't take long to create a pile. This, I think we need to move our camera a little bit on this guy.
Come on, move. That should be better. And I guess we could just make that strictly there for now. And we'll go back to our favorite pastime and sand some more. Probably need to get some fresh sandpaper, I think. So it doesn't last forever, for sure. But even though they're pretty much seen their better days, the center of them is actually still good. So if I need to, I have some stuff that I have a 1-inch holder, so I can go and use the 1-inch holder on them and just trim them down to the 1-inch, because you really only use the outside edge of it for the most part. And we're going to need some dust collection.
I think this is one that I did right to final thickness. That sort of made that bark really thin right there. Yeah, it's nowhere near round. So you have to see how I address that problem. Don't throw your sandpaper on the floor and the chips. So that was a 120. Now I'll just go to the 150. Here's where I sort of have to watch, be a little bit more careful. Because this is where we can leave some scratches, some really bad scratches. as my dad said, this stuff has more sapwood in it than it does heartwood, and the sapwood sort of looks dirty. It's 220. I think I had that is a soft pad for that. I switched and give it a little bit extra padding for the last couple grits. This soft pad here is about had it. Velcro is coming off of the foam. And I didn't get a fresh 600 out, did I? No, we use the one that we were using. See whether it has any cutting stuff left. Not much. Should be enough though. So that's our inside done. Hopefully that holds enough to do what we need it to do. This we do have to cut a little bit right here, I think. Yeah, that'll show if I just try and sand that and leave it alone. So I'll true that up a little bit. It's also a little bit fatter than what it needs to be. Back to our spindle gouge. I'm not going to spin it very fast because it's not not the world's greatest grip that we have on this. So through that part of into the corner and out just a little bit. Make sure we got it round. It looks like we do. Maybe we'll go for a different look here. Just sort of make that a curve into the base. Yeah, that'll be different. And we are done with this tenon. We don't need it to be very big. Just enough to make it sit up off of the table is really what I'm after. Just trying to make that curve a little bit friendlier looking than what it was. Didn't do us a whole lot of justice because it tore things up. Now we have to try and fix that. Otherwise, that's a lot of sanding right there. Probably going to be a lot of sanding. The pain. Now let's go to the sanding part and see what we get. See whether we're going to be able to spin this one and sand it. Hopefully. Definitely going to hit some of these areas right off the bat. I mean, walnut is considered a hardwood, but I tell you right now, it's actually it's fairly soft. So if I sand really, really slow, then maybe it won't. Never mind. I was thinking it would bounce up with it, but gotta get these ridges out of here. And then maybe we'll just sand it the old-fashioned way with sheet paper. Or just do it like this. This is a little bit harder to get everything the way you want it. And I'm going to go around the edge though. That will work. That was 180 we started with. There's 220. This is a cloth back sandpaper. I bought a bargain bag at sandpaper place the other couple of weeks ago. I normally don't get that kind of sandpaper. But it definitely has some uses like right here because it is a little bit stiffer than cheap sandpaper. But I also can't get in there where I need to get. So we'll just use our sheet paper. Get a nice finger massage when you get up there. Not the whole thing, it's because it's out of round, but when you sand this way, then you got to go to higher end grits. So this is 600 here. And then we'll go to 800. And lastly, we'll use a little bit of 800 and do the random orbit routine. Because now is really when we could have some scratches, some sanding scratches that would be very concentric. So we need to break them up. I think that looks good.
Hmm. And I said I didn't need that tenon anymore. It's going to make it more difficult to finish the inside. Clean off as much dirt as I can. This is rather thin. It's probably a 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe. But it's small, so it, to me, when they're small like that, they should be relatively thin. And I guess we can leave it there. So we're gonna put some, let me go ahead and put finish on it, at least on this side, and then I'll have to think about what I'm doing on the other side, I guess. Since I got rambunctious and took the tenon away. So we made our little pad. Go back to our 3408, like we do with pretty much everything else. Start on the end grain, just like what we did on the one I did earlier. As my dad said, this stuff, since it's got so much sapwood, it actually looks dirty on the end, on the sapwood. It doesn't come out nice and white like most sapwood would. And it's pulling more dirt off of there. The pad's getting dirty, which is good. Get the dirt off of it as much as what we can. Looking for it to be saturated. So I keep going over it. Got 40 seconds to get the job done. So we're not going to be in any giant size rush. Want it to soak in, fill the grain up, fill the pores up. And then we will wipe off the excess. And that's pretty much it for the outside. Give it a little shot of activator. Can is pretty much empty. It's done. And now what are we going to hold it with on the bottom? Yes, we just hold it in our hand. Go back overhead. Get rid of a couple things here. Get us another little pad ready. glue away. Yes. This is where it'd be a good time to actually have the glove on the left hand. I'm probably going to get the glue on my finger because of the top. Maybe not. They say the inside takes less than the outside, so one go around there and that should be good enough. Can let it sit for 20 seconds. And then we'll wipe off the excess and get another piece ready for the vacuum chuck routine and get rid of that tenon and finish up the last little bit of the foot. So the old guy that gave us wood, he wants a whole bunch of little bowls to give away at the forestry banquets and whatever other banquets that he goes to that they do the donation stuff. It's kind of pretty, even though it does have some areas of like up in there. It looks dirty, looks like there's dirt embedded in the grain, but I'll just let that one sit. There's more than enough, for me, there's more than enough humidity to make it set up. So we'll just sit it over here on the bench and maybe we'll get to it sometime later on this week, or we're getting a pretty good pile of things that just like this that need just a little bit of work left to them. That's usually what I do. I usually end up waiting until I get a bunch of that stuff and then I'll hook up get the vacuum stuff and hook it up and just do them all at one time. Anybody have any questions, comments? It's going to be a wrap for us. It's 9:15, so. Otherwise, we'll see if we can find somebody to raid into.